Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back, everybody. So, in order to be an effective leader, and let's say you have a team, let's say you're a CEO, maybe you're the owner of a company, you need to have compassion, the right kind of compassion. We're going to talk about that today. By the way, it is World Mental Health Day. That all comes along with it. You might be watching this after the fact, doesn't matter what day it is. Compassion is so key. And we're going to connect with an executive leadership and career coach. And this is part of the things that are in her wheelhouse when she works with people. Denise from Krumlian joins us here on the program. Welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Steve. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. The word compassion, sometimes people connect it to empathy.
Hmm.
Maybe we should start there.
Yeah.
The difference between empathy and compassion. And I remember somebody broke that down for me, but I can't remember what the difference was.
Yeah, sure. That's really, to me, one of the key things. A lot of people talk about it being an empathic leader, and it's so important. And the difference between empathy and compassion. Empathy is when you feel what your people are feeling, the people on your team, your loved ones, what your friends, whomever, you're feeling what they're feeling. Versus compassion is you're feeling it. So you need to have empathy, and you also have the desire to take action. And so I really focus on the compassion piece as a leader, because to feel what your team feels is important. But if you don't do anything about it, then how are you really supporting your team?
So
And
is it
so
safe to say
action.
you need empathy before you have the compassion?
It helps, because otherwise, if you don't, then you may be going in a direction that your team doesn't necessarily need. So the empathy is that you're actually also lockstep with your team. You understand them. And so a lot of leaders may not understand their team and what they truly need. They might think they know, but so they might go and say, oh, they need X, and really they need Y, because they really haven't taken the time to understand their team and what their drivers are and their motivators, or their work.
I guess it really does come down to the individual level of each member of the team and identifying what motivates them, right?
That's a huge part of it. And that's something in my culture of and framework is the three pillars. It's compassion, connection, and commitment. And so what you're talking about in that connection is really understanding what each person in the team, what motivates them, what drives them. Do they understand the value that they're bringing to the organization? Do they understand their purpose? And being a compassionate leader is both inward, having compassion for yourself, as well as outward towards your team, and also understanding the larger organization.
You bring back a memory when I was working for a company, and I remember the general manager putting together, we're going to have a bowling day, everybody. We're going to go to the bowling alley. It's going to be great. We're having a great time. Everything to go. And behind the scenes, most of us were like, really? Um, it came from a good place.
Mhm.
And he just wanted to foster teamwork and people getting together and all of that. Me personally, I would rather, go to a bar at happy hour and hook us up with some apps and, a couple of free drinks and we just kind of hang
Mhm.
out together. That's just me. How does that work? In terms of you want to do something for them, is it you do a survey? Do you talk individually, get inside their head, see what they're into? What's the best way to get that done?
It varies. I really like getting people involved, having them provide the ideas. As a leader, that's one of the key things. When you go from individual contributor to being a leader, a lot of times we feel like we still need to do the work. And really, as the leader, our
Mm.
job is to empower our teams and to help them to be the best version of themselves, so that they can also get the right results, right? So it goes hand in hand with even a team building is ask, don't assume, right? Don't assume bowling is the thing. Food is typically a motivator for a lot of people, or excite or something they can get around. However, some people it isn't. Some people are not food driven. So having a subcommittee maybe to come up with some ideas, and then yes, you have to approve it as the leader, but let them come up with the ideas because they're going to have more buy-in. Also, looking at the time of day, that's a great example
Mm,
of something that can actually be a demotivator if you're expecting people to stay after hours to do that team building because it is a happy hour or bowling or something like that. Do it during work time because that shows the team that you value them and their time outside of the office too. And so taking that time, you might actually get even better results the next day from the people because they will have had that break during their workday and it didn't impact the rest of their lives.
that's a great point. It really is. And I think a lot of leaders don't see that and they think what they're doing for their their team. There was once somebody else did I think, for lunch they brought in trays of Italian food and everything. Well, well taken. And this is a friend of mine. And it was appreciated, but at the same time, she's like, for whatever that cost them, if you gave us, a $25 check or a $25 increase, most of us would have been more happy with that. And I understand that we're trying to foster togetherness here, but
Yeah.
at the same time, if you're overloaded with work, now you got to take the time because you still have to make the work up. So I
Yeah.
guess that's where the compassion comes in to understand what everybody's feeling. Because that other just brought back a memory. Somebody
Mhm.
else, in the past year, there was a gathering, and the first thing she thought of was like, "Oh, well, that's great, but I still got a ton of work to do." So now you took away the time that I had during the day, where while it seems to a leader, one that's apparently disconnected, that this is a great idea. How does somebody in a leadership role fine tune their compassion skills?
That is a great question. It's a lot of self-awareness of where they are right now, and it's getting curious. It's almost becoming so it's first embracing the idea of being even a servant leader. So servant leader being that you put the team before self. And there's so many books on it's not about you as a leader, right? So it starts with that. It's just getting agreement with the leader that it's bigger than just them and that it's not about that their success is based on their team's success. And so having those foundational principles in mind, then you can say, okay, what are some areas of opportunity for improvement? So maybe it's to your just keeping on with that example, right? So you're going to take some time, you're going to have your happy hour from 3 to 5, but that's a critical time because I'm going to use my background in tech. There's a release coming up next week, and it's a critical time to get things done. So, what are you going to do to help alleviate that stress? Is maybe talk with the team that's impacted most and see what other things you can knock off their plate so that they can be laser beam focused the next day to make up that time.
Hmm.
So, that's what I mean by taking action. You're not doing the work for the people. They own their work and you're empowering them to come to the table with solutions, but you might ask them, what do you need? What do you need to make sure that this time doesn't impact you? So that would be an example of how to become a more compassionate leader. But at the end of the day, it's about asking questions.
Oh my gosh, I was just going to say that. I really was. I was almost kind of embarrassed. Like this is going to be rhetorical, but you might want to ask questions because I just come from experience, so I think of different situations, and at that one company, there were some leaders that weren't that great, and I identified them last time or a couple of times ago we got together. But the ones that were would just take a walk around the building and ask questions. Hey, how's it going? How do you do that? Yeah, and not in a probing way, like I'm checking up on you, but just learning a little bit more about them and their work process. Because everybody has a different process, but just
Yeah,
being curious. And then you start learning, put the pieces together. Okay, there's Josh. Josh likes to do this, likes to do that. That's how he functions. Then we have Jennifer. She does it this way. Duly noted. She's got kids. She after work is very challenging for her. Just keeping those notes in your mind, um,
yeah.
I guess really plugging into your team. is really what it comes
Yes,
down to.
absolutely. It is plugging into the team. And how do you do that? By making connection. How do you make connection? By asking questions and fostering a culture of openness and two-way dialogue. Also asking for feedback. What do you need more or less of from me as a leader? So then they
Mm,
can actually that in a lot of times, oh, nothing, everybody's afraid to actually say something to the leader. But if you keep asking and don't give up, you finally get some nuggets in there.
mm,
And ask other people. That being curious is so critical. Your job as a leader isn't to have all the answers. And that's a huge shift from days in the past, right? Where it was command and control. The idea of servant leadership and compassionate leadership is that you understand what the mission is, why it's important, and what's the strategy to get there, and you're consistent in that. And then you empower your team to be the experts in their roles so that they can execute. And you ask them, what do they need to succeed?
mm. I was just going to say that too. It's probably one of the best questions as a leader you can ask. How can we do this better? Is
Mhm,
there, can we do this any better? Like to allow somebody who's deep in the trenches and that's their life doing that portion of the job, they're going to have an answer. They do it
mhm,
day in and day out. They're going to have an answer. You said something a second ago, servant leadership, compassionate leadership,
mhm,
right? What's the
mhm.
difference?
So they go hand in hand. So servant leadership is a style which it's really about putting the team first. And so the compassionate piece is where you bring in that empathy and the desire. You understand your team already. So it's like you having the servant leadership concept in mind, then you might be already a compassionate leader and not really understand what servant leadership is, but really that's the one of the styles of leadership that I really promote a lot as a coach and consultant, is because I found it to be most effective, rather than the command and control, where you're just directive and you aren't really caring about how things get done, right?
Mm.
So that goes hand in hand with my culture van framework, which is about people and the results. And so being a servant leader to start and then having that empathy and compassion helps to get the people connected, have better morale, better engagement, higher performing teams. And then by having a higher performing team, you get the results in a much more effective way.
You've said before that there are three pillars to a great culture in a company. One of them is compassion. What are the other two?
Mhm. Connection and then commitment.
Okay. Connection kind of goes hand in hand with
It does.
compassion,
Mhm.
right? And pretty obvious what that is. How does commitment come into play? How do you define that?
hmm Commitment is the buy-in from the team, the alignment
Uh,
with the team of understanding what you're doing, why it's important, and how you're going to get there. And so many times as the macro culture of the organization, and then you have your subcultures within your teams. Maybe one team is functioning really well and they're on the right track and it is supporting the larger organization. Another team might perceive that they're functioning really well as a team, but they might be off on another path because they're not aligned with the overall mission, values, vision of the company. So it's really important as leaders that we not only think we understand it, but that we ensure that our teams understand it. And one of the best ways is to have a consistent vision, mission, and strategy. And that's something I do help people with in creating their vision, statements, their mission statements, and then what's the strategy and the roadmap to get there.
with the leaders that you coach, Denise, what do you hear the most when it comes to compassion? What are they struggling with? What do you give advice on for the most part?
Mhm. I think it is that realization that it starts with the people. So many leaders at the end of the day have this pressure to perform in the bottom line. And that's why I created the culture van framework is because it is important. It's a business after all, right? It is a business. And if you don't start with your people, you don't have a business because the people are ultimately the business. You can have a product, but the people are the ones that are creating the product, promoting the product, doing all the things with the product. So it really, the leader, the mindset of, oh, if only I didn't have to deal with the people problems so that I could just do my work. Like that's the biggest thing that I see, and or the assumptions around, I think they need this, or I think they think this. Well, ask, and
Mm.
that's part about going back to that compassion.
How do you deal with it on an individual basis? Because your team, they have personal lives, they have challenges. Um, let's say somebody comes to you with a certain challenge. We can hypothetical make it up, but you want to take care of them, but you're concerned that if you do, you're setting a precedence for the rest of the team. And maybe it's something that, bending the rules a little bit, making work hours, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
How do you handle that kind of situation?
Again, when you are connected with your team, when there's already trust, when the morale is high and there's engagement, that becomes easier. And so starting with those pieces helps because then when there is an exception that you need to make, it's easier to talk about it openly because there's transparency that you can have as well. So, and the team is going to trust that you have all of their best interests in mind and that you're not playing favorites.
Hmm. Yeah, I didn't pick up on that until you just said it. Yeah, it
Hmm.
could be perceived that you are playing
Can be.
favorites with employees.
Mhm. The
Can
other, yeah,
can compassion be taught?
absolutely. It can be, and there has to be a desire for it, though. I mean, at the end of the day, it starts with the individual. So if the leader has a desire to be more connected with their team, to not just have better results at the bottom line, but that really wants to be an effective leader, then if they are open to that change and transformation, then yes, I believe that they can become more compassionate. Some people it comes easier than others. Some
Hmm.
people are natural empaths. I think we've talked about that. We're both natural empaths, and so that can be a great start. But it also can be there's some things to look out for too, because when you feel deeply what other people feel, the emotions can sometimes get in the way of being the best leader you need to be in the situation as well. So compassion again doesn't mean that you have to fix things for people or be the one to do the work, but it is what support do you need right now? Maybe finding a resource for them or providing the opportunity for them to have the time to get the resources that they need. So it doesn't mean that you have to do it all for them.
What I'm gathering here is be the ear. Just let them feel like they're being heard is probably one of the most important things when it comes to leadership, compassionate leadership.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
what I mean by feeling valued and understanding their purpose. So, connection and compassion go hand in hand. And the connection piece is, do they make a connection with the work they're doing and the bigger picture of the organization too? And so if you're hearing things like, ugh, I just sit here and I just create widgets all day. Like, okay, that's an opportunity. So have that's an opportunity for the leader to express to the person what the value is of the work that they're doing. It's not just doing the same thing over and over. It may be that they are helping to create a specific product that's going to be a medical device that's going to help somebody survive. So it's like understanding at that deeper level, they call that job crafting. And I mean, there's papers on that. And it's just like,
Hmm.
somebody was a janitor and at NASA and the group of two groups of the cleaning people in NASA. And one group was just like, yeah, just come in and do my job. The other one was, no, I'm helping to put a man on the moon because they understood that even though their job wasn't necessarily directly building the spacecraft, it was still part of the overall organization.
What you're saying there was said to me by a leader back in the day. However, And this kind of leads me to the question I wanted to ask you.
Hmm.
A sense of ownership.
Hmm.
That janitor, yeah, he's just cleaning the floors. However, he is part of the bigger picture of putting a
Yeah.
man or woman on the moon,
Hmm.
and he's got a sense of ownership. Like that's part, it's almost like that's my company too.
Hmm.
Even though I'm not an owner of the company, I'm treated like it is. Now, that's been said, and I remember I can hear his voice in my mind
Hmm.
talking about, whatever's, maybe he was asking me to work extra hours or something like that. But yeah, you want to have a sense of ownership, invested, and blah, 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 blah. And what he was saying was great, but I didn't believe his stuff.
Hmm.
Um, And not a lot of people did. And I referred to him previously as the one that would say, "My door's always open. Come in here. It's an open door policy." Nobody wanted to walk in there because at some point, invariably, you feel like you're in the hot seat. Like you got called to the principal's office. And it shouldn't
Hmm.
be that dynamic, my
Hmm.
opinion.
Absolutely.
So how do you how do you foster the loyalty, you know, getting people to believe you because let's say you really mean what you're saying, but you really want people to feel it. How can you convey that?
You gotta walk your talk. It can't be just words because how people end up feeling from the interactions with you is going to be what they remember.
Hmm. Well, great point. Because what are we talking about here? I'm remembering how that went. I
Hmm.
still remember him and all the things he did. Some of them as a leader, uh, not getting into detail, big fail. Did
Hmm.
not stand behind his team. Did not stand. All he did was care about his butt. And there
Yeah,
was,
and that's the thing. It's not about you as the leader. It's about your team. And that's the biggest thing when people get into leadership roles is it's a huge shift and it's not and some of it's not even the fault of the person. I can speak personally from this. When I became a manager for the first time from being an individual contributor, I took it really seriously. I had no training. That's
Mhm.
part of why I do what I do now is because I know how hard that transition was to be a good leader in that time because I was also still a doer in that middle management level. So I did have to do more as well as oversee 10 people. And so it was a huge shift and a lot of times people aren't given, oh, you're great at what you do, so let's make you a manager. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the person's automatically going to be a good leader. They need help with
Mhm.
that.
I was in that situation too. I went from decades of working for a big company to switching because I wanted to do leadership for a small company. Um, no training whatsoever, no feedback, kind of just fend for myself, right down to, not even kidding, emptying the garbage cans. I would walk around and do that. I was
Hmm.
like, it needed to get done. I'm doing it. That's what it is. 19 months I spent there. Eye-opening experience,
Yeah.
looking at it from the lens of the leadership lens on the other side.
Yeah.
All of this is so important. Would you say this is probably the most important thing when it comes to leadership? Compassion.
Personally, yes. I think it is one of the probably top three things that I would say. Yeah, having compassion is really
Mm,
what will make it all come together. Having an understanding of the vision and what you're doing and why is also super important because you need to be able to communicate that to your team. Otherwise, they're going to be all over the place and not really understand what they're doing or why they're doing it. But the compassion piece at the end of the day, you spend so much time with the people you work with. Make it fun, make
mm.
the connections and the results will come.
It can be fun. It
It
can
can, it can.
and should be. This is just a
Mhm.
part of what you offer when it comes to executive leadership training and coaching and all of that. Best way to find you? How do we do that, Denise?
DeniseKrumlian.com, easiest way. Can set up the discovery call, can do workshops, that can do one-on-ones, strategy sessions, all of it. So
So important. You know, yes, we're looking at the bottom line, but unless you're taking care of this stuff, you're not going to grow your company without compassion. Your last name, Krumil.
Krumlian,
Gotcha.
Krumlian.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for being here today. What you said crystallized with me in terms of what people remember. And again, here I am talking about this one boss who could have been so good. He lacked real compassion. He really did. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. Those are the facts. And it's not just me saying that, but imagine how much the team would have been better. Company would have made more money if compassion was exercised.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for today. Looking forward next time we talk.
Me too. Thanks so much.
We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.